Today's lesson is on probability, and it's actually from the 7th grade Glencoe textbook, which is Chapter 9, Lesson 1. So this is our introduction to probability. There are a couple of words that you need to be familiar with. First one is probability. Probability is the chance that some event will occur. Another word you need to know is outcome. This is the way something turns out. Something for you to know about probability is the probability of an event is actually a ratio. And we've studied ratios before, so this isn't anything new. This ratio compares the number of favorable outcomes something is favorable, it means you get what you want. To the number of possible outcomes. So what that tells us is there's a lot of possibilities of things happening, but do we actually get what we want? And that's what probability is. So we can summarize this by saying the probability of whatever event it is will equal the number of favorable outcomes compared to the number of possible outcomes. Another thing you'll have to do is determine how likely an event will be to occur. And so we can put that on a scale. Looks like this. And in the scale, 0 is impossible. It will not happen. And a 1 is it will absolutely happen. It is certain. So if you're in the middle at a half, then the event is equally likely to happen or to not happen. Okay, you could also represent it here at a fourth and say that that event's unlikely to happen. It could happen, but it's unlikely to happen. Or you could also put it here at 3/4 and say This event is likely to happen. All of these can also be represented as decimals and percents. So, of course, 0 as a decimal is just 0. And that's also 0%. Unlikely is 0.25, 25 hundredths. Now to write that as a percent, remember you bump that decimal. So it would be a 25% chance of happening. 1/2 as a decimal is 5/10. And if we bump, that would give us a 50% chance of happening. 3/4 is 75 hundredths as a decimal. Bump would give us a 75% chance of happening. 1 as a decimal is just 1, and that is a 100% chance of happening. Something else for you to note. Outcomes, which remember is the way something turns out. Outcomes occur at random if each outcome is equally likely to occur. Okay, so now let's start with some examples of probability. So for example 1, let's say we have a number cube. And so this number cube will have size 1 through 6. So that means you have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a 6. 1 on each side of or face of the number cube. Okay, so for this problem, find the probability of rolling a 6. I'm going to write it over here. I'm running out of space. Okay, so what we'll write is we want the probability of rolling a 6. All right, so now we have to think of, okay, well, how are we going to write this? Remember, it's like a ratio. And if you'll look back up to here, the way we write it down is the number of favorable outcomes over the total number of possibilities. So a favorable outcome would be actually rolling the 6 because that's what we want to happen. There's only one face of the number cube that has a 6. So there's only one favorable outcome, but there are 6 sides on the cube. So then we're comparing that to the number 6. So just to review, that 1 is the number of favorable outcomes, and that 6 is the number of possible outcomes. Okay, so as a fraction, it's 1 to 6 for this ratio. Okay, now if they ask us to write this as a decimal, you'll need to remember to change a fraction to a decimal. All you have to do is take the numerator and divide it by the denominator, because that bar means divide. 1 divided by 6 gives us 17 hundredths. And then if we want to write that as a percent, all you have to remember is bump, bump. Bump, bump towards the percent sign, so the percent is 17%. Okay, a lot of times You know, you might be in a competition or be making a decision with a friend about who's going to have a turn. So people flip a coin. So let's see what it is to have the probability of a coin landing on heads. Okay, so our event is the probability of landing on heads. So first we have to think about what would the favorable outcome be. Well, we want it to land on heads. Well, a coin has two sides. Only one has a heads on it. So one favorable outcome and possibilities. A coin has two sides, so there's two possibilities. So again, that one is the number of favorable outcomes. The two represents the number of possible outcomes. Okay, if we write this as a decimal, we would say 1 divided by 2, which equals 5/10. And then if we write this as a percent, bump, bump, will give us a 50% chance of it happening. All right, well, let's change our favorable outcome options. So example 2 says, let's go back to the number cube. So now we've got a number cube. And the number cube still has 1 through 6. Okay, we're going to find the probability of rolling 2, 3, or 4 this time. So the way we write it, for the event, we write the probability of rolling a 2, 3, or a 4. Okay, so first of all, remember I'll be thinking of the number of favorable outcomes. And at the bottom, I'll be thinking of the total number of possible outcomes. Well, we're still in a number cube, so still just has 6 sides. But now I'm looking for a 2, 3, or 4. I could roll any of those 3 and I would be happy with those results. So favorable outcomes, I have 3 this time. Now, something about our probability. When we find our fraction answer, you have to write it in simplified form. So this is not simplified. So now we have to simplify. So I noticed that both the 3 and the 6 are divisible by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. Okay, so that's my fraction. Okay, then I have to write this as a decimal. So 1 divided by 2 gives me 5/10. And percent, bump, bump, gives me a 50%. A lot of times they'll give you spinners and have you look at the spinners. Now, I'm going to sketch this, but assume that all of the sections are equal size, even though I won't be able to draw them all perfectly equal. So we're going to label A through J. Again, pretend that those are all equal size. Okay, so for this one, let's find the probability of our spinner landing on the F. So like if I had a little arrow that I could spin around, what's the probability that when I flick that spinner that it would land on an F? Alright, so first of all, the number of favorable outcomes. Well, F. I need an F. There's only one F on the board, so that goes on the top or the numerator. And then the number of possible outcomes. So you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10 possibilities. Alright, that's simplest form, and so that's my fraction. I'm going to get my decimal, 1 divided by 10, 1/10, and then for my percent, I bump, and I have a 10% chance of landing on F. Okay, I could do the probability of landing on a D or a G. So there's one D and there's one G. But this time there's two things that would make me happy. So 2 favorable outcomes, and I still have 10 choices. And I notice that my fraction is not in simplest form. So we'll divide by 2, divide by 2. Gives me 1 out of 5 chance. 1 divided by 5 for my decimal will give me 2/10. And then I bump, and I will get a 20% chance of landing on a D or a G. Okay, one more time. What about the probability of landing on a vowel? Okay, so then I look at my spinner and I'm going to see how many vowels I have. I have A, E, and I, so that's 3. 3 things would make me happy, and I still have 10 possibilities. That's in simplest form. 3 divided by 10, that's 3/10. If I bump, I will get to a 30% chance of landing on a vowel. Okay, one more scenario. So for the third example, we're going to look at, well, what about not landing on something? So we'll go back to our number cube. And the number cube has 1 through 6. So this time, let's find the probability of not rolling a 6. So the way I write that event is probability of not getting a 6. All right, so I need to think of this number cube. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And if I need to, I can write them over here. I've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a 6. Okay, well, I want to not roll a 6. That would make me happy to not roll the 6. Well, how many things would make me happy? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I could roll any of these 5 things and be happy because it's not a 6. So I have 5 favorable outcomes, and I still just have 6 items. And that's in simplest form already. And in my calculator, I type 5 divided by 6, and I get 83 hundredths. I make that a percent. I bump, and I get 83%. All right, now let's say we've got a bag of marbles. All right, so we have a bag that contains 5 blue marbles, 8 red marbles, and 7 green. So let's find the probability of not. Pay attention to when it's saying not in your word problems. Not selecting a red. Okay, so to write my event, I need the probability of not selecting a red. And that's, of course, if you're not looking and you choose one without looking. Okay, so then I look back at my numbers. I have 5 blue, 8 red, and 7 green. Well, which ones are not red? Blue is not red, green not red. So if I have 7 plus 5, I get 12. So 12 are not red. That's favorable. That would make me happy. And then the total amount of marbles I could choose, I would have to add 5 plus 8 plus 7. So there's 20 total marbles to select from. And then I need to simplify this. So we'll divide by 4 to reduce and get 3/5. Okay, and then I'm going to write this as a decimal in a percent. So 3 divided by 5 in my calculator gives me 6/10. And then when I bump, I get 60%. So one of the problems that you'll work out in your independent practice today has you look at a table, and it has these events that are happening. So if the event has a 50% chance of happening, then you would know that there's also a 50% chance of it not happening. This event has a 75% chance of actually happening, so then it has a 25% chance of not happening. So let's take this event for an example, because I think in the word problem it says, well, what's the chance of it not happening? So if you know it's a 75% chance that it will happen, 25% chance that it will not happen, but then it'll want you to give the answer as a fraction and as a decimal, so you can work your way back. So for changing a percent to a decimal, I bump 2 away from the percent sign, so the decimal will look like this. And then to make this into a fraction, I say the number out loud, 25 hundredths, 25 hundredths, but then I make sure to reduce that fraction. So I notice they are both divisible by 25, so my simplified fraction would be 1/4. Okay, now you're ready to start your independent practice.